For Emulation Week, we are going to be showing a DEC PDP-10 running the operating system TOPS-10 with monitor 704, and we will be starting up from console and then logging in to a user session to show the 1986 version of the original Essex University multi-user dungeon that was created in 1978 and was the first in the world, and was created by Roy Trubshaw and Richard Bartle. So we're going to start off. You'll see we have two screens here, and we're going to focus in first of all on the operator's console, where we will be starting the simulator up with the TOPS-10 operating system and booting that. So first of all, let's enter the simh command to start up the emulator. So we're now going to boot the operating system. We're at the boot ROM here, and we see just press return and it will load the operating system from disk B. We're doing a scheduled reload and the start off option is go. We're now starting up the operating system daemons, and we'll shortly be into the operator's console. And here we are in the operator's console. We can check the status of the system just by pushing off the console for a minute, having a quick look at the sysstat, and then just seeing that the jobs are running all fine, and you can see that from there. So we'll now pop back to the console, and then we're going to move away from the console and look at the user session. Here on the iMac we're running a version of Cool Retro Term. This simulates a 1980s or 1970s VDU, complete with scan lines and noise and various other artifacts that you would have seen on a CRT back in those days. We're going to be connecting to the user session on the PDP-10 through a Gandalf MUX. Gandalf made many MUXes, multiplexers back in the day, which connected terminals to various computers and allowed you to switch between them. The computers themselves then also generally had a terminal concentrator, also a MUX, but that only allowed one terminal at a time on the to be connected to the single computer. So here we are connected through the Gandalf MUX, and we have the dot prompt that it was common with DEC operating systems, and you see that it's not logged in, so the first thing to do is log in. We're logging in as MUD, which is the multi-user dungeon account for Essex University, and you'll notice that we're now logged in, and we will do a quick directory of the account to show the binary files that are in place to play the MUD game. You'll note this is slow scrolling. That's because we're running at 2400 baud for a bit of realism. Now we're going to load the MUD game into Core and run it. And here it is, the Essex University multi-user dungeon. You'll notice this particular generation was generated in 2019, which is when I compiled and ran it initially, but in practice it's actually the 1986 code base and dates back to 1978 as the original. I'm logging in with my persona here, and you'll see that I'm now logged in as Jadwin the Champion, and this is the opening start location for MUD on Essex Uni. Just to give you an illustration of what MUD looked like, I'm just going to run through a couple of rooms, but in practice MUD was a multi-user game. I'm the only user on this system, so it probably doesn't play any different to any other adventure, but it gives you a sense of what you might have seen had you been around in the early 80s or late 70s and were connected via PSS to Essex University, or indeed actually were located at Essex University and using a local terminal there. So I'm not going to dwell much longer on this beyond giving an illustration of what happens, and then we will move on to a system shutdown. So having cleaned the groats, we've now turned it into treasure. We're now going to move on to the system shutdown. So we're going to quit MUD at this stage, and then we'll focus back in on the console. We're now going to log out, and we're now going to focus back in onto the console down here, the operator's console, where we will be shutting down the system in a managed way. We're doing this immediately, so we're using set cases now rather than any particular date or time in the future. Time sharing is over, as you can see on both the system console and the user terminal. We're now going to log out of the console terminal. We end the operator job and then end the user, and then we can control E into the simulator emulator, which is SimH, and quit that, and you'll see that it's all ended. So there you are, that's the DEC PDP-10 running TOPS-10 with monitor 704 and the 1986 code of the Essex University 1978 multi-user dungeon.